Good evening, everybody. We're still in chapter 3, where everyone in the store is waiting for Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Hudleston to join so that they can talk about the details of the wedding. Both Forsyth and Dr. Huddleston simply had to be present. After all, wasn't it a question of finalizing the date of the ceremony? The wedding was supposed to take place as soon as possible, provided, however, that the maid of honor had time for the manufacture and purchase of an appropriately gorgeous gown. For the first time in her life, Cecily Lou would be wearing the floor-length gown of a young woman. And bearing this in mind, Francis quipped, "So what happens if the notorious gown isn't ready in time?" "I'll demand the wedding be rescheduled," declared Miss Lou imperially. And this decree was followed by an outburst of giggles that was raucous enough to reach Dr. Huddleston up in his watchtower. The conversation continued. The clock ticked away, and Forsyth still didn't show up. Lou leaned out the window to see if he was at the front door. He wasn't. And even when Mrs. Hudleston, Lou, Jenny, and Francis crossed the courtyard and went out into the road, they didn't see a sign of the man anywhere on Morris Street. All they could do was go back to the living room and practice patience, a virtue Lou hadn't gotten around to cultivating. "Uncle promised me he'd be here," Francis kept saying. "But for several days now I'm not sure what he's been up to." "You don't think Mr. Forsyth is sick, do you?" Jenny asked. "No, he's all involved in something, God knows what. You can't coax 10 words out of him from morning to night. What could have gotten into him?" "Moon madness," Lou snorted. "Why, it's been the same with my husband," Miss Huddleston said. "This whole week he's seemed more distracted than ever. Wild horses couldn't drag him away from his lookout tower." "Something unusual must be happening out in the solar system." "Yea, gods, I'm ready to believe it, the way my uncle's been carrying on," Francis replied. "He doesn't go out, doesn't sleep, barely eats, keeps us waiting at mealtime." "That must thrill Mrs. Mitz," Lou commented. "She was furious," Francis stated, "but it went in one ear and out the other. My uncle used to hate it when she harangued him, but now he doesn't even notice." "It's no different with that," Jenny said with a grin. "My sister seems to have lost all her influence over him, and God knows she used to have plenty." "Say it isn't so, Miss Lou," Francis said, also grinning. "Yeah, she's right," the girl answered. "But just you wait. With Mrs. Mitz and me on the case, my dad and your uncle will shape up real quick." "Anyhow," Jenny continued, "what are the two of them so worked up about?" "Some precious planet they've been mislaid," Lou snapped, "and they'd better find it in time for the wedding." "We're joking around," Mrs. Huddleston said, "and meanwhile Mrs. Forsyth still hasn't arrived." "It's almost 4:30, Jenny added. "If Uncle isn't here in 5 minutes," Francis stated, "I'll run home and—" The doorbell rang just then. "It's Mr. Forsyth," Lou announced. "Listen to him. He just keeps leaning on the bell, but he doesn't even realize it, 'cause his mind is a million miles away." "Lou doesn't miss much," It was Dean Forsyth, all right. And when he came into the living room, Lou told him, "You're late, late, late. You deserve a good talking to." "Hello, Mrs. Huddleston," Forsyth said, shaking her hand. "Hello, dear Jenny," he added, giving the young lady a hug. "And hello to you," he finished up, pinching Lou on the cheek. Forsyth went through these civilities absent-mindedly because, as the saying goes, he had his head in the clouds. "You know, Uncle," Francis continued, "when you didn't get here on time, I thought you'd forgotten our meeting." "Yes, nearly. It's all my fault, Mrs. Huddleston. Please accept my apologies. Luckily, Miss Mitz reminded me of in the nick of time. In the nick of time." "Good for her," Lou declared. "Go easy on me, my dear. I've got important things on my mind. I'm on the verge of a really intriguing discovery." "Aha! Just like that, I'd say," Jenny commented. "What?" Forsyth exclaimed, leaping up as if the seat cushion in his armchair had poked him with a loose spring. "Are you saying that Dr. Hudleston—" "We're not saying anything at all, my dear Mr. Forsyth," Mrs. Huddleston put in quickly, justifiably worried that the old rivalry would flare up again between her husband and Francis's uncle. "Lou, go get your father," she added. "Light as up, bird. The girl flew up the top of the tower, and if she took the stairs instead of fluttering out the window, she must have been saving her plumage for better things." A minute later, Dr. Stanley Hudleston came into the living room with a worried expression, bloodshot eyes, and cheeks so flushed he looked like he was about to have a stroke. He and Forsyth exchanged a routine handshake, but clearly they were looking at askance. Askance? What type of word is that? At each other, eyes furtive, faces lined with distrust. In any event, the two families were as one on the purpose of the meeting, which was to set a date for the wedding, or, in the lingo of astronomy, to determine the conjunction of those two heavenly bodies, Francis and Jenny. So this was the only item on the agenda. But it turned out that there really wasn't much to discuss because everybody agreed that the ceremony should take place as soon as possible. As for Forsyth and Dr. Huddleston, they were completely oblivious. Were their minds out in the cosmos, hunting for their lost asteroid? Was each man wondering if the other one was on the verge of finding it again? But anyhow, they raised no objection to the young people's getting married in the near future. It was then April 3rd, and the rest of the participants picked May 31st as the day of the wedding. An ideal date, you might think. "But it all depends on one thing," Lou commented. "What's that?" Francis asked. "What are the winds blowing from the northeast?" So what difference does that make?" "Because, as Dad says, criminals are less active in that kind of wind. After all, it would be a really bad sign if you got married during a crime wave." Chapter 4. How two letters, one sent to the Pittsburgh observatory, the other to the Cincinnati observatory, were filed in the folder on shooting stars. The letter reads, "To the director of the Pennsylvania Observatory at Pittsburgh, April 9th. Dear Mr. Director, I have the honor of drawing your attention to the following fact of great interest to the world of astronomy. In the northern skies on the evening of April 2nd or 3rd, I discovered a shooting star moving at high speed from northeast to southwest. It appeared in the lens of my telescope at 11:37 and 22 seconds and then vanished at 11:37 and 49 seconds. Since then, despite the most careful surveillance, I've been unable to see it again. Accordingly, I'm writing to ask that you duly note and record the information in this letter so that should the said meteor reappear, I'll be credited with making this invaluable discovery. Please accept my highest regards, Mr. Director, and I remain most humbly at your service. Dean Forsyth, Elizabeth Street, Boston. The second letter reads, to the Director of Ohio Observatory at Cincinnati, April 9th. Dear Mr. Director, on the evening of April 2nd, from 11:37 and 22 seconds to 11:37 and 49 seconds, I had the good fortune to discover a new shooting star moving across the northern skies from the northeast to the southwest. Since then, I've been unable to reconfirm the trajectory of this meteor. But if it reappears on our horizon, as I am sure it will, it seems only fair that I will be acclaimed as the discoverer of this major addition to the annals of contemporary astronomy. Please accept my sincerest personal regards, Mr. Director, and all assurances of my continuing esteem. Dr. Stanley Hudleston, 27 Moore Street, Boston. And that's the whole chapter 4. Chapter 5 now. 3 weeks of impatience, during which Dean Forsyth and Omicron on the one hand, and Dr. Hudleston on the other, don't find their shooting star again, despite the most relentless sky watching. Addressed to the directors of Pittsburgh and Cincinnati observatories, the foregoing letters, double-stamped, triple-sealed, and complete with cover notes, called only for the simplest response. This response would most likely take the form of a straightforward acknowledgement that the said letters had been duly received and filed. The interested parties asked for nothing more. They wanted to lay the proper groundwork in case other astronomers, whether amateur or professional, also sighted the meteor. Dean Forsyth, for one, hoped to find it again any second now, and Dr. Huddleston also had high hopes. The possibility that their asteroid was lost in outer space, that it had escaped the Earth's gravitational pull and would never be seen again by mortal eyes, this was something they flatly refused to accept. In accordance with known physical laws, their shooting star would show up again on Boston's horizon. They would spot it again, going by, bring it back into focus, determine its coordinates, add it to the sky maps, and baptize it with exalted name of its discoverer. But on the day of its reappearance, it would emerge that 2 different conquerors had claimed that exact same territory. And what would happen then? If Francis Gordon and Jenny Huddleston could have known the perils of the situation, they would have exclaimed, "Dear God, help us get married before the watched shooting star comes back." And Mrs. Huddleston, Lou, Miss Smiths, and all their acquaintances would have repeated the same heartfelt prayer. But none of them knew any of this, and even though they'd noticed how perturbed the 2 rivals were, they had no suspicion of what was behind it all. Undoubtedly, it had something to do with astronomy. But what? Set aside from Dr. Huddleston, the residents of the house on Moore Street weren't a bit troubled by what was going on in the far reach of space. But though they didn't have any worries, they didn't have plenty of work. There were announcements to send to the friends of both families. There were rounds of visits, congratulations, and thank yous to be made. wedding arrangements to get underway, invitations to go out for the church ceremony, ditto for the banquet, which would bound to involve around 100 guests, satisfactory seating arrangements to devise, and wedding presents to select. In short, the Huddleston family weren't twiddling their thumbs, and if we're to believe little Lou, they faced a real time crunch. She reasoned it out this way. When the first daughter gets married, it's a big deal. It's something new. Nobody had any practice at it. They're extra careful not to overlook something. Then when it's the second daughter's turn, it's old hat. Everybody knows the drill. Nobody worries about forgetting anything. So when I get married, there'll be nothing to it. Nope, nothing at all, Francis answered her. Since you're almost 15, Lou, it probably won't be long now. You just stick to marrying my sister, the girl answered with an outbreak of giggles. You haven't got time to worry about me. Meanwhile, Miss Hudleston kept her promise and arranged to inspect the house on Lambert Street. The doctor was too busy up on his observation deck to go with them. Oh, that Lambert Street is where the young couple want to buy an apartment or a mansion. I really don't remember. It was a couple of days ago I was reading that. You do what you think is best, Flora, and I'll be fine with it, he replied when she invited him. Besides, it's really up to Francis and Jenny. I myself don't have time. Look here, Dad, Lou said. You're going to come down from your watchtower on the wedding day, aren't you? Of course, Lou. And you'll go to St. Andrews with your daughter on your arm. Of course, Lou. And you'll wear your black dress coat, white vest, black trousers, and white tie? Of course, Lou. And while Father Garth says Mass, you'll forget about your planets and participate. You'll forget about your planets and participate? Of course, Lou, of course, but that's off in the future. And right now the skies are clear, which doesn't happen very often in April. So you just run on without me. And that's how Mrs. Huddleston, Jenny, Lou, and Francis Gordon left the doctor to fuss with his binoculars and telescopes, and the sunny weather guaranteed that Dean Forsyth would be up the same thing in the watchtower of his home on Elizabeth Street. And who knows, maybe the meteor they'd seen once before, the meteor that had since vanished into outer space, will shoot in front of their telescope lenses a second time. The inspection team left that afternoon. They went down Moore Street, crossed Constitution Square, and got a friendly wave from Judge Broth on the way. Remember Judge Broth? They headed up Exeter Street, just as Seth Stamford had done 2 weeks earlier while waiting for Arcadia Walker. They reached the Wilcox subdivision and turned down Lambert Street. We should note that Lou insisted that Francis bring along a good pair of pocket binoculars, since he claimed they would have a terrific view from the window of their new home. Lou planned to explore every inch of the available horizon. They reached 17 Lambert Street. After going in the front door, they began their inspection with the ground floor. It was really a very attractive dwelling, smartly designed in a comfortable modern style. It had been well kept up. No repairs needed. All they had to do was furnish it. The furniture was already on order at Boston's finest upholsterer. There you go. This is our 20 minutes. See you next time.